Congratulations, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to say a few words, although I do have to admit I've been struggling for what I could possibly say about this topic that my fellow classmates have not already heard me say. But there is one story that I thought I might share with you today. It's a story of how I came to PA school to begin with. Many people often ask me, how did you go from working in technology and mass media to PA school? It all started with a book I read about Dr. Paul Farmer, which opened my eyes to the vast inequalities that exist in healthcare on a global level. My interest in international health was piqued, and I found myself exchanging emails with a husband and wife team who needed volunteers at their clinic in West Africa. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was on a plane and ready to help at their HIV clinic in Ghana. One day while working at the clinic, an unknown stranger dropped off a rather sickly 15-year-old boy, Eddie Grant. He had a large open wound around his left eye. It was rather jarring to look at, disfiguring, and you could smell the odor from far away. He had been dropped off there because no one could or would help him. His maturity and interest in America drove us to become fast friends. I bought him a video game player, took him to the hospital, and helped with cleaning his wound. He was HIV positive from birth. His mother had been a prostitute, and she had recently died, after which his father abandoned him. After his wound became so disfiguring that it caused him to go blind in his left eye, his own community shunned him. No one wanted to touch the food he ate or even be around him. Just before she died, Eddie Grant's mother had tried to take him to an AIDS orphanage run by a well-known Western church group, but he was turned away. Eddie Grant was just too sick, and his mother's prostitution was out of line with those who apparently deserved to be saved. It seemed that their organization, like so many others that I came across, was too busy serving those who made for good fundraising stories back in the US. Condom distribution for women like Eddie Grant's mother, which could have potentially saved her and ultimately Eddie Grant from HIV, was out of the question. Not only did the religious groups disapprove, but the current US government refused to give any assistance to organizations, including the clinic I worked at, that didn't profess an abstinence-only policy. Never mind that many women, such as Eddie Grant's mother, were forced into prostitution as a means of survival. After a while, Eddie Grant was obviously getting much sicker and needed more advanced medical care. Our friendship continued to grow, and I wrote about him on my blog, and I asked family and friends to help pay for his health care. They responded with over $2,000, which not only helped Eddie Grant, but many others in the clinic who were just like him, sick and alone with their own stories of being refused health care elsewhere. Many of them had ended up in our clinic after it had developed a reputation for being one of the few that would open its arms and doors for anyone and for any reason. Eventually, the clinic asked me to go to the US Embassy and try to get him a visa. I did go to the embassy, but not until I had my own errand to run there. When I was there, I remembered Eddie Grant, and I looked out the window and saw lines of people snake down block after block, standing in line in an attempt to get a visa to the US. I really didn't think I could help him get a visa, so I didn't put too much effort into it. I thought everything would work out, and that it wasn't really up to me. What would be, would be. I put it off and went on my adventure to Timbuktu and the Sahara Desert. After I came back, Eddie Grant was in a lot of pain, and most of my time was spent helping the physician clean and debride his wound, and going from pharmacy to pharmacy, buying whatever pain relievers they had in stock. Before I returned for New York, Eddie Grant's uncle thanked me for my time and my willingness to be one of the few who would spend time with Eddie Grant. But his uncle openly wondered, why didn't I work harder to get that visa for his nephew to come to the US? I gave him an obviously lame answer, saying I was busy and I had forgotten. To which he replied, I hope when you finish your medical school, you won't forget your patients the same way. Shortly after I got home to New York, I received word that Eddie Grant had died. He died needlessly of an infection complicated by AIDS that could have likely been easily and immediately treated here in the U.S. Or better yet, right there in Ghana, if they had just been given the resources and support needed to provide basic health care to those who need it, irrespective of political or theological agenda. I immediately felt a sense of shame and that I had not worked harder to help him. I just assumed that someone else would swoop in and save him. Although I know that Eddie Grant's death wasn't my fault, I still felt a debt to him that his uncle's comments had instilled within me. It's a debt that I am not sure that I can ever repay, but I vowed then that I would honor that debt and work even harder to address inequalities in healthcare that befall millions of other Eddie Grants around the world, including right here in our own backyard. I don't know that I've been that successful, but I would like to encourage you to acknowledge those debts that we have to our patients. Patients who not only can't speak for themselves, but are denied the opportunity to do so by the very people that we vote into office, head up our corporations, and work alongside of us. The cause of healthcare for the underserved is a cause that is often viewed as a charitable one, rather than the right one. It's too easy to do what I did and say that things will work themselves out. We say, oh, isn't that too bad watching those poor people without food in that other country? While we lament that the real tragedy is the high price of gasoline. Although Africa and the problems of Eddie Grant seem a world away, throughout my clinical year, I saw Eddie Grant in many of my patients. From a service patient at OBGYN on the Upper East Side to leprosy patients that our colleague Daphne and I worked with in India. I ask you, as my fellow future PAs, to consider Eddie Grant in your patients. Before shrugging them off, consider the unjust social and economic policies and centuries of institutionalized racism that have put so many of our fellow human beings in a position of struggle. All over the news, every day, we see people struggling through disasters all over the world. I often wonder, would we think differently if the images we see on television portrayed hordes of people who look just like us? Would those people be allowed to suffer while we all watch on the sidelines? Consider that if you, as I did, that someone else will correct the wrong and do the healing, that perhaps no one else will. Consider stopping for a moment and realizing that we are the ones being called upon. I know that it can be a difficult task dedicating time and effort to such a cause, but there are many things we can all do. The organization that I helped to found just after I returned from Africa and learning of Eddie Grant's needless death, the Health Equity Project, exists almost exclusively to help those who others are unable or will not help. Consider something basic, such as sending some of those unused samples of medications that we are all about to receive as new PAs to our organization or another organization where they can be put to good use. Perhaps even spend some time traveling as a PA and lending your medical skills in places where your help will be appreciated and rewarded tenfold. Or go a step further and speak up against inequality and injustice. Speak with your vote. Speak with your actions by refusing to treat patients differently based on their personal circumstance. As a part of the healthcare system that rewards the haves and punishes the have-nots, we are all in a uniquely suited position to demand change. So please go out and demand that change and consider dedicating some of your time to be a part of enacting it. Thank you.